Hey guys, and welcome back to my BookTube and Author channel. Today I'm going to be doing a question and answer video about Child of the Dragon Prophecy, my debut novel and the first book in the Shadows of Light series. Thanks for joining me today. So I put a question box on one of my Instagram stories asking you guys for what kind of questions you would want answered about my book, Child of the Dragon Prophecy. You guys had some amazing questions and I want to answer all of them. Hopefully it won't be too long of a video, but if it is, I'll just have to do a part 2. So the first question I have is, what genre am I writing in and what are my favorite things about the world? The genre I'm writing in is young adult epic fantasy. It's my favorite genre to read, and so far it's been my favorite genre to write as well. My favorite things about the world are the magic system, the history, the different realms, all of the different creatures, and the religions that I've actually put a lot of time and effort into that help shape the world. How long have I been writing it and how long have I been working on it? The idea for the Shadows of Light series was birthed 6 years ago, and I've been officially writing it for about 5.5 years, which means I started when I was 12 years old. I've been writing the same series since I was 12. It's been a really long time. The next question is kind of a quick overview of the world that this series takes place in. The Shadows of Light storyline takes primarily in Venturnovia, which is one of the many continents of the world Rasa. There are several different kinds, which are like the creatures that are on the planet, and 2 of the main kinds are the Dragon Riders and the Shayzook. And then I have separate sort of subcategories in those races. For instance, in the Dragon Rider category, you have a subrace of Dragon Riders, humans, and Y Riders. And then in the subcategories of the Shayzook, you have centaurs, fauns, tree spirits, nymphs, and other creatures like that. Each kind uses like a different branch of magic, but Dragon Riders are generally considered to be the most powerful and that have the most overarching knowledge of magic. Other kinds aren't quite able to tap into the knowledge that the Dragon Riders have. When Dragon Riders bond with a dragon, their minds and souls become one with the dragon, so they're generally considered one creature instead of them being just creatures that they ride. The centaurs speak to the stars because it is believed that they were actually birthed from stars at the beginning of time, and that they originally came from the star realm Hanla Rasa, which will play a big role in some of the later books in the series. The time that the Shadows of Light series takes place in is actually quite close to the end of their world, so it's almost kind of like a fantasy dystopia series. It revolves around a prophecy that's partially started to come true, starting with the fall of the Dragon Rider Empire. The last part of the prophecy just starts to take place at the beginning of the book with the birth of Stefania, who is one of the saviors, although it seems like they're born too late because Duvarharia, the land of the Dragon Riders, has already been basically annihilated. Next question is, who is the main character? My main character's name is Stefania Lavoisier. She is the orphaned daughter of the leaders of Duvarharia, the Dragon Rider Kingdom. After her parents' death, she's adopted by centaurs and lives with her mother, Frondin, and her father, Aaron, and has a centaur brother, Trojan. She loves reading, but prefers to be outside, doing things like riding her horse, archery, or sword fighting, but if she could take a book outside, she often does. She has blood red hair, which symbolizes her to be the savior mentioned in the prophecy. Without giving too much away, she is later given over to a dragonless Duvarharian who was a friend of her parents, his name is Dalton, to be raised until she is old enough to return to her homeland. They live in a human village at the time, and because of that, and other reasons, which I'm not going to spoil, she thinks that she is a human. She's really stubborn and can be pretty selfish at times, but she's also totally loyal to the core, would die for those she loves. And she's also very tender-hearted. So she tries to act like she's all big and bad, but really she has a pretty soft side. She struggles a lot, especially in the first book, with her identity, having been raised by centaurs, and then by a dragonless Divarharian, and then living amongst humans. She doesn't really know what it means to be a dragon rider. She is bullied by the humans because of their differences, and often is haunted and tormented by night terrors. Least favorite character. This is actually kind of a funny question, because if you would have asked me this a year ago, I would have just immediately said Stefania. I absolutely hated her. I did not relate to her. I did not like the way she was. I did not agree with any of her actions. And then because of the way she acted, I did not like Dalton because of their relationship. However, after rewriting the entire second half of the first book just to change her personality and therefore her relationship with Dalton as her guardian, I actually love them now so much. So I can't say that I have a least favorite character at all. I really do love everybody now, even my villains. Next question is, how did I come up with my characters and what are they like? Okay, this is kind of tricky because I did start making these characters 6 years ago, so it's kind of hard to remember why I made anybody the way they are. But I gave Stefania blood red hair to start with, like that was her main trait to begin with, because I was obsessed with Merida from Brave, and I loved her crazy curly red hair. I loved Brom from the Inheritance Cycle and his sort of storyteller, fatherly personality, and so he inspired Dalton a lot. Trojan was actually originally supposed to be a female friend centaur of Stefania's, and I probably have a version of my book somewhere that is like that. But after I decided that she was going to be adopted by the centaurs and not just traveling with them, I wanted to have a really good sibling relationship, and I gave her an older brother because I have 2 of my own and I think they're amazing. Article was inspired by Chiron. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce it, but he's the centaur from Greek mythology. The wise old centaur lives up in the cave by himself and raises heroes up, basically. I loved the idea of an all-knowing, all-wise centaur mentor guy, so I made Article kind of based off of him. All of my characters have developed a lot farther than these basic principles, but that's kind of where some of them started. Many of my characters' personalities and backstories and stuff were shaped because of the main plot. I started out with more of a plot-driven book than character-driven book, so they kind of molded themselves to the plot more than the plot going to the characters. What famous character dynamics would I compare the dynamics of my characters to? I really want to answer this one, because it's actually a really cool question. I think it would give people a lot of insight to my book, but I have never thought of it before. So I honestly don't know. I hope to think about that somewhere and maybe do another video about some correspondences there. Alright, what's my favorite thing about this book and series? There are so many things I love about my books, but in a strange way, I love the foreshadowing the most. I wrote these books completely out of order. Like, book 3 got written first, and then I wrote kind of book 2, and then book 4 and 5, and then 1, and it's a mess. But because of that, I know exactly where everything's going, and so I got to foreshadow pretty much everything, sometimes too much. Thankfully, that's what good editors are for, so you don't spoil everything right off the bat. But I absolutely love it, because I can't wait for somebody to read the series and go, oh my goodness, that's what that was back there. And it also makes rereading books so much funner. But on a deeper level, I love the way this series has allowed me to live in a world as complete and diverse as Earth is. I don't know just the world surrounding the series of this book. I know the creation of the world to its destruction. I know pretty much everything. I've lined out wars that have happened, cultural divides, the rise and fall of some empires and different kinds and creatures and their relationships with each other. So when I say it's a diverse, built world, it really is. I could write an entire history book on it probably easier than I could write a normal book story off of it. And it's
it's basically as complex as Earth, but with magic and dragons. So how can that not be, like, how can you not love that about your books? All of these characters have also been my family and my friends and my children. Like, they mean so much to me, and that's what I love the most about it, is the weird relationships that I've had with these characters, because they feel real. And a lot of the times, I miss them when I don't write more than I miss regular people, which is probably not healthy, but I've survived the last few years of thinking like this, so I think it's probably fine. Another thing I love is the theme of memories that goes throughout the series. I never realized that I had this theme until this last couple of drafts of my book, editing drafts. But even when I was 12, I was working in this subliminal, if I can say that correctly, theme of memories. Lost memories, finding memories, making memories. And I think that's just kind of a really beautiful theme that I've been able to work in, and it's been really fun to mess around with and just see everything connected by memories, and just how the past really means something if we would just listen to it. I also love how I've been able to shape this world to display some personal beliefs of mine that I would otherwise not necessarily be able to tell people, or that wouldn't be easily understood, or that I wouldn't want to tell people. So I've been able to kind of express these beliefs without having to outright talk to anybody about them, and that's actually really special to me. Most of all, I just love how real it is. I don't ever feel like I made this series up. I always felt like I was discovering it. Like the world had already been there, and I was just watching something happen, and I got to be the lucky, honored author to write it all down. This is one of my favorite questions that I got. Would it be better as a blockbuster movie or a Netflix series? So this one's actually kind of hard for me to answer, because when I was younger, I always imagined it as the big movie. And there's still a part of me that would just love to have a movie. And I still even have like theme songs that would play in during the credits that would just be perfect with a movie. But now that I'm seeing how good Netflix is doing with their books to TV series adaptations, and with The Expanse of my books, and how you can put more into a series, and how more accurate series tend to be when based off of books than movies, I would have to say Netflix. What's been the hardest and easiest part of writing these books? Or what was the hardest thing to write? Okay, my answer is a little bit strange and kind of all over the place for this. But the most basic answer I have is the hardest thing for me to write is joy. And that sounds super bad. But whenever I've been faced with like a happy scene or a joyful scene, it's so hard. It's like trying to squeeze molasses out of a tree for me. Like, I feel terrible. I should be able to write happy scenes and stuff. It's not like I have a terrible life, you know, I have a lot of joy to draw upon, but it just does not flow well for me. So give me trauma, tears, pain, I've got it covered. I can write that all day long. So yeah, my books will probably have a lot of sad themes in them, so hopefully you won't cry too much. But the deeper answers that come to mind are kind of almost the opposite of the question. The hardest thing to write was actually unwriting all of my old writing from being 12 to about 14, 15 years old. I don't lie when I say I've been writing this since I was 12. I didn't like start writing it and then pick it back up recently. I've written it for a solid 5.5 years. And I did finish the entire series, which ended up first of all being about 4 books, in 2 years. But all the rest of the 3 years I have spent editing and redrafting and rewriting, and I have not once stopped in my life on writing this series. So the plot has stayed the same, the characters have stayed the same, I even have hundreds of scenes that are the same, but I've had to rewrite all of it because work from a 12-year-old, no matter how good the story or the idea is just terrible. Like, you can be a protege, and I can guarantee you'd probably still be terrible. Like, maybe not, I don't know, you could be like the Beethoven of being an author, but it's still bad and needs a lot of help. So that's been the hardest thing for me, because sometimes you just can't scrub all of that old writing out hard enough. It's nothing like being able to just make a new draft where you can just automatically not write filler words, or you can not write gross, horrible, cliche slang words of being an angsty 13 or 14-year-old. But when you've been writing it the whole time, I've gotten to go through every stage of cringy writing, from being 12 all the way up to being 17, 18, where I am now. So rewriting cliches and bad writing from being a young teenager and going through every single bad stage there is in one book series has been so rough. The other hardest part was not stopping writing. I had been working on it for so long, it does get extremely discouraging. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. There were times that, especially when I was having some rough patches with not having friends, moving, things like that, where my writing really suffered and I did not want to continue writing. Especially when I was around like the 6th draft and I was just going over and over the whole thing, just wondering why the heck I was even writing. I wasn't really writing for myself anymore. I wasn't writing for anybody else. I just really struggled to figure out why I was doing it, and I didn't know what else to do. I didn't have any writing friends. I didn't have like Bookstagram for like a writing community or a reading community. I wasn't reading much in that time of my life, so I didn't have a lot of inspiration either. There were a couple of times when I just broke out just sobbing, and the only thing that kept me from just basically deleting my entire manuscript was my parents pulling me back from the edge. But what kept me going a lot through that was knowing I had put too much effort into it to stop. So mostly it was just kind of violent stubbornness that got me through, but that definitely was the hardest part about my writing journey. But with all of that said, I did get through it. My parents were amazing supporters through that. And I'm really glad they were there for me, and I'm so glad that I pushed on and finished, because it really was worth it. Not to end on that depressing note, but this video ended up being quite a bit longer than I expected, and I don't want to just slam you guys with a billion questions in a 30-minute video all at one time. So I will be making a part 2. So if you liked this, please keep a lookout, hit the subscribe button to get a notification when I do come out with part 2. And I hope you guys enjoyed learning about my book. I'm super excited talking about it. I've never done a question and answer before. And so this is kind of the first time that I'm really getting the ideas out there and getting some news about it. So thank you so much for watching and being on this journey with me. I hope you join me for part 2. May the sun smile upon your presence.